A fashion show held last week in a picturesque, snow-clad town in Indian-administered Kashmir has sparked a major controversy that is still simmering. The show, by the well-known fashion brand Shervan and Naresh, was held last Friday at a ski resort in Gulmarg to display their skiwear collection. The label is the first big, non-local brand to hold a fashion show in Kashmir, a scenic Himalayan region which has seen decades of violence. But it soon sparked outrage among locals, politicians and religious leaders in Muslim-majority Kashmir after fashion publisher Elle India posted a video on social media which showed some models wearing underwear or bikinis. Locals were also angry over another video, shared by online magazine Lifestyle Asia, of a party held after the show, which showed people drinking alcohol outdoors. Many took offense with the show being held in the holy month of Ramadan, a time of fasting and prayer for Muslims, and accused the designers of mocking their faith and disregarding local culture and sentiments. Some clerics called the show obscene and said it was like soft porn. Some others explained that the outrage had arisen not only from religious conservatism, but also from a fear of cultural imposition from outsiders. Kashmir has witnessed decades of armed separatist insurgency against Indian rule since the late 1980s. The backlash prompted Elle India and Lifestyle Asia to delete their videos. Shervan Bhatia and Naresh Kukreja, the designers behind the label, also apologized, saying that their sole intention was to celebrate creativity and that they didn't intend to offend religious sentiments. Kashmir, known as the land of saints and Sufism, Islamic mysticism, has a rich tradition of spirituality which influences many aspects of people's lives. The traditional attire is modest, with locals, both men and women, often wearing the faran, a long, loose cloak. The row also moved off social media, and a discussion about the show and the after-party caused a ruckus in the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly. The opposition criticized the government, accusing it of giving permission for the event despite being aware of local sensitivities. Meanwhile, Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah distanced his government from the event, saying it had been organized by private entities and asking local authorities to investigate the matter and submit a report. If law has been violated, strict action will be taken, he said in the assembly on Monday. The police have not yet given details about who organized the event and what laws, if any, have been violated. The fashion brand did not respond to the BBC's questions about the show, including about permissions it obtained. It's not surprising that scenic Gulmarg, one of India's few skiing destinations and a favorite with tourists, was the choice of venue for a show highlighting a skiwear collection. Fashion journalist Shefali Vasudev says it's not uncommon for designers to want to hold fashion shows in exquisite locations. In fact, international designers like Alexander McQueen and Karl Lagerfeld are remembered as much for their creative, theatrical fashion shows as they are for their iconic designs. But experimentation brings with it the risk of controversy, and so, it's important to be mindful of the political and cultural sensitivities of a place, Ms. Vasudev told the BBC. And this holds especially true in a place like Kashmir, which has witnessed wars and decades of armed conflict. Both India and Pakistan claim Kashmir in full, but control it only in parts. Since India's partition and the creation of Pakistan in 1947, the nuclear-armed neighbors have fought 2 wars over the territory. Thousands of people have been killed since the late 1980s, when a separatist insurgency broke out against Indian rule. Though the separatist movement has lost steam over the years, many locals continue to view the administration in Delhi with distrust. These sentiments have deepened since 2019 when the federal government, led by the Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, stripped the region of its autonomy. So some locals told the BBC that they were not surprised by the reactions to the show. Everything in Kashmir is political. People see things through a political prism, says Mir, a professor at a local university. He asked for his surname to be withheld to protect his identity. He adds that people are skeptical about big corporate events like the fashion show and, even if they are organized by private players, they believe that the government is trying to dilute their culture. Arshid Ahmad, a researcher, uses stronger words to express public angst. The government is trying to dilute the spirit of resistance in Kashmiris, he says. Some of the recent apprehensions around culture and identity can also be tied to the increase in tourists to Kashmir from other states in India. The federal government has often connected this boom in tourism to the abrogation of Article 370, which stripped the region of its autonomy. Nushin Fatima, 34, says because of government messaging, people outside Kashmir now see the region as being safer and more assimilated with India. But she alleges that many tourists do not respect the region's culture. Last year, a video showing tourists drinking alcohol during a boat ride on the famous Dal Lake in Srinagar evoked outrage from political and religious leaders, who called the behavior un-Islamic and unethical. In February, locals put up posters in Srinagar asking tourists to respect local culture and traditions and avoid alcohol and use of drugs. But these were later pulled down by the police. In an editorial for the Voice of Fashion magazine, Ms. Vasudev argues that the outrage needs to be examined from a critical lens. She asks if it would have been all right for the show to have been held in another Indian city instead of Kashmir, where Muslims would also be observing Ramadan, and whether it would have been acceptable to hold the show in Kashmir if it featured only outfits perceived as modest. She also points out that Kashmir is home to the world's finest wool yarn, some of the finest hand-spun, hand-woven pashmina creations and its artisans. What Kashmir creates and stands for cannot be replicated anywhere. Shouldn't a fashion show at Gulmarg then, with innovative garments made with 100% wool, be seen as regenerating interest in untried ways? She asks.
U.S. President Donald Trump's escalating trade tariffs will hit world growth and raise inflation, the OECD has predicted in its latest forecast. Canada and Mexico are forecast to see the biggest impact as they have had the harshest tariffs imposed on them, but U.S. growth is also expected to be hit. The OECD has more than halved its growth outlook for Canada for this year and next, while it expects Mexico to be pushed into a recession. Trump has imposed 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports. The U.S. has also imposed 25% tariffs on other imports from Mexico and Canada, with some exemptions, and a 20% levy on Chinese goods. In response, Canada and the EU have both announced retaliatory tariffs. The Paris-based OECD said the higher trade barriers and increased geopolitical and policy uncertainty were hitting investment and household spending. In the OECD's latest forecast, Canada's economy is predicted to grow by just 0.7% this year and in 2026, compared with the previous forecast of 2% for both years. Mexico is now forecast to contract by 1.3% this year and shrink a further 0.6% next year, instead of growing by 1.2% and 1.6% as previously expected. Growth in the U.S. has also been downgraded, with growth of 2.2% expected this year and 1.6% in 2025, down from previous forecasts of 2.4% and 2.1%. Despite the U.S. imposing tariffs on China, the OECD has increased its growth forecast for the country slightly to 4.8%. The OECD said the developing trade war was set to push up inflation, which will mean interest rates are likely to remain higher for longer. Significant risks remain, it warned. Further fragmentation of the global economy is a key concern. Higher and broader increases in trade barriers would hit growth around the world and add to inflation. The OECD said that for the world economy, growth would slow from 3.2% in 2024 to 3.1% in 2025, largely as a result of the trade tensions. It also said it expected inflation, the rate of price increases, to continue to slow, though not as much as previously anticipated. The organization is predicting inflation of 3.8% this year across 20 of the world's largest economies, compared with the 3.5% it had previously forecast. Last week, Elon Musk's electric car firm Tesla warned that it and other U.S. exporters could be harmed by the trade battle. In a letter to the U.S. Trade Representative, the firm said U.S. exporters were exposed to disproportionate impacts if other countries retaliated to Trump's tariffs. The OECD cut its growth forecast for the UK's economy to 1.4% in 2025 from its previous forecast of 1.7% and to 1.2% in 2026, down from 1.3%. However, the forecast is more optimistic than the Bank of England, which earlier this month cut its UK growth forecast for 2025 to 0.75%.
Forever 21 could be a step closer to shutting down operations in the U.S. after the brand's operating company filed for bankruptcy protection. The firm said in a statement that its stores and website in the U.S. will remain open as it begins its process of winding down. Forever 21 was once a favorite of young women around the world, but it has struggled to attract customers to its shops because of rising prices and the growing popularity of online shopping. The company filed for bankruptcy protection for the first time in 2019, but a group of investors ended up buying it through a joint venture. We have been unable to find a sustainable path forward, given competition from foreign fast fashion companies, as well as rising costs, economic challenges impacting our core customers, Brad Sell, the company's chief financial officer, said in a statement. The firm said it would conduct liquidation sales at its stores and that some or all of its assets would be sold in a court-supervised process. In the event of a successful sale, the company may pivot away from a full wind-down of operations, the firm's statement said. Chapter 11 protection postpones a U.S. company's obligations to its creditors, giving it time to reorganize its debts or sell parts of the business. Forever 21's shops and e-commerce platforms outside of the U.S. are operated by other license holders and will not be affected by the bankruptcy protection filing. The fast fashion retailer was founded in Los Angeles in 1984 by South Korean immigrants. Its inexpensive, trendy clothes and accessories became increasingly popular with young people over the next few decades, and the brand became a competitor of fast fashion giants such as Zara and H&M. At its peak in 2016, there were 800 Forever 21 shops around the world, 500 of which were located in the U.S.
Custard powder makes a delicious dessert, but also has a rather less savory potential. In certain conditions, it can be a powerful explosive. Instant custard powder is a staple of many kitchens. Just add water and heat, and the powdery mixture of cornstarch and flavorings will transform into an unctuous treat. It's hard to imagine anything more inoffensive. But on November 18, 1981, at the Bird's Custard Factory in Oxfordshire, the substance showed its dark side. A hopper of powder overflowed, and the resulting dust cloud ignited, exploding into flame. 9 people were injured in the explosion. They were lucky. Powder explosions can be lethal. 14 people were killed in Minnesota in 1871 when a flour mill went up. 44 people, including a child, lost their lives to a cornstarch-based explosion in 1919 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which leveled part of town. The main explosion seemed to lift great buildings and hold them in tension for a moment, letting them drop with their own weight. One observer wrote later, dust explosions of various substances had continued to take lives. In 2014, 97 people died when dust in a factory in Kunshan, China, ignited. In 2022, one industry report counted 50 such explosions globally, although not all of them involve foodstuffs. How can the making for a simple dessert cause carnage, though? In all dust explosions, there are few common factors. The powder must be made of a flammable substance. That means you're safe from sand, which is made of minerals like silica. But flour, cornstarch, sugar, coal dust, powder plastic, and aluminum powder can all burn, meaning that if they get airborne, the risk for a truly devastating explosion goes up. That's because, suspended in a cloud, all those particles have an enormous surface area exposed to oxygen. That makes them swift to combust. If a few of them heat up to ignition, and in each of these cases, there was a source of heat like friction or static electricity involved, then the fire can spread almost instantaneously to the rest of the cloud, like a pile of confetti ignited in a fireplace. Suspended dust burns fast. That evening at the Bird's Custard Factory, there were 20 workers on duty. Several noticed that cornstarch was pouring out of the top of one of the bins, according to the accident report. At this point, several witnesses saw a flash near the top of the bin and a wall of flame spreading outwards and downwards from the bin top. The report continues. Descriptions were of a gale-force wind with a flame from behind, which flashed through the area. Later inspection revealed that the machinery meant to pour cornstarch into various bins had malfunctioned. So cornstarch continued to pour into the container until it overflowed. Keeping the risk of such explosions down means coming at the problem from many angles. Grounding all the machines in a factory to reduce static electricity, building infiltration systems that remove dust from the air, and diligent patrolling for any dust buildup are all recommended by health and safety agencies. Look at a spoonful of cornstarch or custard powder, and it is nearly impossible to imagine it as an engine of destruction. Very few of us have any direct experience of these events. So it's hard to see these substances the way you might see a sheet of paper held near a candle or a cigarette smoldering by a pile of leaves as an accident waiting to happen. There are situations in which you might encounter this dangerous chemistry in real life. However, outside of a custard factory or flour silo, parties in which colored powder, often cornstarch, is shot into crowds, inspired by the Hindu festival of Holi, are popular springtime events. In 2015, at a water park in Taiwan, colored cornstarch sprayed over a concert audience ignited, provoking a maelstrom in which more than 500 people were injured. 20 people died as a result of their injuries. The park's management stated that they had no knowledge that such explosive fires were possible as a result of cornstarch clouds. In fact, colored powders are often sold with labels incorrectly marking them as non-flammable. A team of scientists found in 2023 when they tested the combustible qualities of various powders. At Bird's Custard, that day in 1981, the wall of flame thankfully did not kick up any dust that could have provoked a secondary explosion. But it's not uncommon for dust explosions to go from bad to worse as lingering dust is kicked up and rises into the air. The only way to prevent these disasters is to preempt them. Say consultants who assess the risks for companies. Keep spaces where powders are used clean, patrol for sources of heat, and, above all, have a healthy respect for the destructive potential in innocent, edible powder like custard.